Okay, I think we are in good shape to get started. My name is Catherine Balistreri, and I will be your host today. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Frank Sohn, President and CEO at Novus CPQ. Frank is originally from Germany and started his CPQ experience with an SAP project focused on variant configuration in 1996. He started his career as a developer in 1993 and then became an SAP consultant in 1994. After spending a few years with a small SAP consulting firm in Germany, Switzerland, and the UK, he worked for multiple global high-tech companies such as IBM GS, Hewlett-Packard, IBM, Juniper, and PwC prior to following his passion and founding his own CPQ-focused consulting company. Throughout his career, Frank has been passionate about the customization and personalization that configuration price quote tools enable and wants to help his clients get the most value out of the CPQ process and tools. Frank works with his clients on CPQ education, CPQ project management, tool selection, and configuration optimization. We're really excited to have him today. And with that, I will turn you over to Frank to share insights into the 4 trends forward-thinking manufacturers should be considering when it comes to digital transformation.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Catherine. So today I want to talk about the digital transformation in manufacturing. And let me see, I want to move my slides forward, and that will hopefully work in a sec here. Okay. It does. Oh, okay. So I have 4 topics that I wanted to touch on today. So, and I talked to each and every one, obviously quite a bit, but just one note ahead of time, not everyone is using all of these capabilities today. I think they will be key for manufacturing companies going forward, right? So the first one is subscriptions, and don't think it's only for software companies, right? So it's also used more and more for manufacturing companies. I think it's important to keep that in mind. Then we have artificial intelligence, machine learning. There was a lot of hype around this. It's still very beneficial, could be very beneficial, depending on what you want to use it for. I tell you what I think, where and how it could be useful. Then we talk about the enhanced customer experience. In this case, that's visualization. Where is it used? How does the usage increase among manufacturing customers? And then we have the number 4 is part of the ecosystem. That's really how CPQ integrates with all the other systems that manufacturers typically have. So let me go ahead and try again to move my slide. So first was the subscriptions, something you probably all know. Subscriptions are really not the new concept, right? So they have been talked about, they have been hyped quite a bit lately, but this concept has been around for a long time. Anyone who remembers when you bought paper newspapers, right? So, or magazine subscriptions, that is very similar. So you subscribe for a certain period. If you don't like it anymore, you stop the subscription. So the concept itself has been around for a long time now, since it has been revived by software companies when they switched from on-premise software to cloud-based software. Then through that success, it has become more interesting for others as well, right? And I think that's one of the main reasons that more and more business now look into this, because they saw the success that others had with this concept and now try to replicate this in their own industries. So let's talk about one thing. So they are not just for software companies. It's not new. It's still pretty early in the process. I think there are still many manufacturers who have more basic issues first before they would go to the subscription. But it's good to keep that in mind, because you want to have a solution that's already considering this, so that you don't have to switch in 2 or 3 or 5 years whenever you are ready to move to subscriptions. You want to have a solution now that's supporting this going forward, even if you're not ready to use it right away. Now let's look at one thing I also wanted to mention is when you look at all the users right now, so there's a lot of younger users that are joining the sales force, and the workforce, and they are actually getting used to subscriptions all the time, because everyone has probably some subscriptions, some more than they want to. And what you appreciate the convenience, and you probably want to use that going forward as well in your business environment. So, and even if that's not the majority right now, we will get there. So I think it's still early, but it's good to pay attention to this development. And hence it's good to at least learn the basics about this. Oh, by the way, and there is a good book that you could look at if you're really seriously interested in subscriptions. That is from Mark Stiving. He has recently issued a small book that was Win, Keep, Grow, explains all the basics of subscriptions. So if you're into this, think about it, have a look at this. It might help to stimulate some thoughts. But in general, there are different subscriptions types that you can use, and different companies use it. That's why I wanted to talk a little bit about it. You have these simple subscriptions where you probably have a subscription. I have a subscription to Netflix. I have one to Spotify. I have one to Hulu, and so on. So there are, but these kind of subscriptions are really basic. So it's a fixed amount of time. You pay a fixed amount of money, right? So for Netflix, every month is, I don't know, $17, $18, $19 a month, and you keep paying until you cancel the subscription, right? Now, then you have other subscriptions which are a little bit more sophisticated, where I would say the subscription amount for a specific period of time depends on how much you use the product. So that's different. You also have some examples that, it's like your electric bills, your phone bills, and other things, right? So where it really depends on how much you use the product, and you will be charged accordingly. So the feature is really, it's a variable amount. I cannot tell you at the beginning of the month how high your heating bill will be, because it probably depends on where you set your thermostat. It depends on the weather, and then the amount could be different. So that's a little bit more sophisticated if you think about that for manufacturers. In order to do something like that, you probably have to have some devices which are Internet of Things, IoT capable, because you have to measure the usage of the machine, right? Just think about it. Before, when you just sold the machine or the product that you manufacture once, if the customer is using it afterwards or not, you don't care. As long as the sale is done, sure, in the long term you care, but the amount of money doesn't change based on how the customer is using it. That's a fundamental change for subscription, right? So it's not just about the initial sale. You want to keep customers using your product. Once you have that, then you even think about how can you offer more services to your customer, so that they keep increasing the usage of the product. So all things you did not have to think about. So it's not just a pricing change that you're doing here. This is a business model change which has deep impacts to all the processes and systems that you're using, right? Now you have also this has been around for quite a while, but I see it more in marketing materials, this term outcome-based subscriptions. There are various examples which are used here. I think Tacton is also using this example with GE or Rolls-Royce, who is building the machines for airplanes, and then you count how long the engines run, not where the airplane is flying, right? So I had the different example that I have from a customer that I worked with. It was from a hospital. They had X-ray machines, and they didn't want to charge for the machine anymore. They wanted to charge, or they do that actually right now, based on the images that they produce. So how is that different to usage-based? So if you use the machine for 10 hours and you get 10 images, then I charge you for these 10 hours, right? For outcome-based subscription, I would have the same thing. But during these 10 hours, I produced 50 images, and I charge you for 50 images. So the two things are different. They are both have a reason to be there. But they function a little bit different, and you have to have the systems set up to to support both of them, right? So again, going back to this Internet of Things, IoT capable devices where you measure how some things grow. One thing I also wanted to mention over here, because as I prepared a little bit for this webinar, I was looking up a couple of different numbers. The one that I thought was most compelling was a little research study from Intuit and QuickBooks, and they had shown that subscription models in general generate 217% more profits than one-time sale. So that's something I think it's worth to let sink in, is the customer lifetime value increases considerably when you use subscriptions. Now, it's easier said than done, obviously, right? So I don't think every company needs to switch to subscriptions right away, but it definitely makes sense to consider it, to have a look at it, if you could use it, where you could use it, and to select the CPQ solutions. In my case, since I'm focused on CPQ, right, make sure they support this going forward. But as I said, it does not apply equally to everyone. Good, so let me go ahead and talk about the general benefits. The one thing that's always cited, you will see that on every marketing document that you see, is where you would say you have ongoing business relationships with your customers, which is in the first thing good, right? So, but keep in mind again, so it comes originally from software. For manufacturing, it's a little bit different. I give you some benefits that I see for different manufacturer types here in a sec. You also have lower upfront costs for customers, so it's a benefit for the customer. It's obviously a challenge for a manufacturer, because if you switch, this transition period is hard. And lots of companies struggle with that. There is not one way how to do that. And this would go well beyond the scopes of what we're trying to do here, but it's a benefit for a customer. It's definitely a big challenge for a manufacturer to change to that model. Then it's also the challenge, so just to mention it explicitly, is you have one-time revenue goes away. So you get, for the big machine that you're selling, you get the $100,000 today, which is great because it covers your costs. You know what you made. You can tell your sales rep exactly what the commission is and stuff like that. If I break this up, and just keep in mind, a subscription is not the payment plan. You're not just dividing it through the runtime, right? So this is different. But again, that's too much for this session. But when you go ahead and you adjust to this recurring revenue, you have to answer a whole bunch of questions that you may not think about right away, right? So, but that's a big challenge. So, because it changes the business model, it's not just that you change how you charge for things. It also adjusts roles and responsibilities. Just think about the things that you already know, like customer success teams. Why would you need the customer success team if I go from the one-time sale to a recurring sale? So for the one-time sale, I need the sales team. The sales team is selling to the customer. If they are convinced at one point, they take over the machine, the manufacturing machine, and then either they use it or they don't. Honestly, as long as they are happy and potentially coming back when they buy another machine, I'm happy. Now with the recurring, I need to have a team on site that guarantees success so that these customers stay with me. That they are not just signing up for 6 months and then they are gone, right? So that has a bunch of roles and responsibilities that change, and that needs to be kept in mind. Now, having given you all these warning notes, now also the benefits, right? So for original equipment manufacturers and contract manufacturers, I think you have a very good chance, and that's what I see also from customers, right? So that they have higher customer satisfaction because you can do things that you so far could not do. One example which people love to mention is still pretty rare, but I would expect that will become much more common pretty soon, is this predictive maintenance. That goes hand in hand with something that I mentioned a little bit later with the visualization. So, but in general, I think that's a big point here. So you actively increase your customer satisfaction. So because you maintain the machine and you make sure that the customer does not have downtime or has less downtime. Another big advantage is since you monitor what your customer is doing with the machine, you have a much higher chance to increase your revenue. And I mentioned it already earlier with the study from Intuit and QuickBooks, where the recurring revenue was 217 times higher than the one-time revenue. So the revenue growth is there, has a bunch of different flavors. And what's also interesting is because now, since you're monitoring the machine, you also get to know your machine better. You get potentially lots of data, which will help you to improve the machine even further. Maybe you can add additional options that you can charge for. Maybe you gather data that you can use in other places that you wouldn't have thought about before. So because you get this amount of data and you regularly analyze the data and put that back into the R&D for the next manufacturing machine, right? You improve the machine. For the manufacturer itself, and so in this example, just for anyone who is not necessarily 100% familiar with this, so manufacturer over here, that would be to me like a car manufacturer. Let's say this is GE or GM or Ford, and then you have OEM contract manufacturers. This is your Bosch and other companies who deliver towards the manufacturer, right? So manufacturers, I think they have the advantage they can reduce capital spending because now you don't have to buy all these machines, so you subscribe to them, right? So with all the risk to the others as mentioned, right? So, but for the manufacturer, that's definitely an advantage, and for every end customer who's using that right now with websites and stuff like this, there's an advantage. You don't have to spend all this money up front. Then you optimize the machine utilization, and you have typically lower operating costs because the subscription company is typically responsible for maintenance, repair, software updates, and so on, right? So you don't have to do all these things yourself. You hand this off via the subscription. Anyway, so now I told you potentially more about subscriptions than you wanted to know, but it's still just a very small piece of what you should know before you think about seriously doing that. And I think one key piece is to look for a CPQ solution that they support these capabilities. They may not need to support everything right away, but that depends on your industry. If you're in software, it should support whatever you do right away. If you're in manufacturing, it's still early, and it may not need to do all of that right away. Good, so then let me go ahead and I talk a little bit more about artificial intelligence, machine learning. That was hyped quite a bit 2-3 years ago. You could have thought everything is replaced by machines by now. It's definitely not the case. You can see that. People use the term less right now, but actually use it more often. So just very quick summary for everyone. What is it? In general, it simulates human intelligence in the machines. It has two different flavors as machine learning and deep learning. We only care about machine learning as a subset of artificial intelligence. And what that does is on the highest level, where I would say you have data and you let run algorithms over this data to detect patterns, right? And when you detect these patterns, what would you use that for in CPQ? It's obviously you would use it for products. Which products go potentially together? What prices should I charge for these products? So these are two different flavors. The first one is very important because it can increase your bottom line. Now, what I hear before I talk more about it is some people claim that it doesn't matter if it's artificial intelligence or machine learning, or if you do that in a other sophisticated way in your system. Yes, that is true to a certain degree, but if you want to reduce the manual maintenance, then it's important you have something that's automated, that's learning dynamically. Just think about one example here. You have today potentially a spreadsheet where you would say, hey, if I sell product A, I also want to recommend product B. That's fine. As long as you don't have too many products, I can maintain this data potentially in a spreadsheet and it works just fine. Now, if I have thousands of these products and they change multiple times a week, it's almost not possible. It's not really realistic to expect that all this can be maintained manually. So in this case, technology, in this case, machine learning, makes a lot of sense and really helps you to do something that you couldn't do manually, right? So it always depends on your situation to see, does it really make sense? Does it also make sense for you as a customer to pay for this? The next one is price guidance. That is becoming more important. I can see that with customers, and pricing depends on how you define it. For me, pricing right now is first and foremost, we have a price that is the same across CRM, CPQ, and ERP. So if I tell you the price for the product is $100, it should be $100 in every system, and they should use the same logic, and it should come back with the same price. Now that's becoming a little bit more sophisticated now, where I would say I want to have that more dynamic, because what I just described, the static price determination that you could do 20, 25 years ago was, in my case, what I know since I teach it, was the SAP pricing. But in this case, you want to have it a little bit more sophisticated. You want to say, hey, this is potentially a price for a specific customer in a specific region. And this group of sales reps can discount up to this price. And then they need to have authorization from their next level of management to go ahead and so on. So you have potentially more capabilities in there where that's useful. So you use it to find products that you work with, you find prices that would work for that customers. And now more companies last couple of years talk about white space analysis. Again, that has been around for a longer period of time. The idea behind that one is you as a customer have certain products. I probably, as a manufacturer, I probably offer more products than what you have from me. I could find out based on the data that I have from you, what other products would potentially work for you and could suggest them to you. Now, this comes obviously with a little note here. You don't know what the customer has from other manufacturer like yours, maybe some of your competitors, because they always want to work with two manufacturers to become too dependent on one. So, but if you take that with the grain of salt that I just mentioned, the white space analysis can be very powerful because you can open potential opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have known about. So that's the three areas I want to limit it to. So products, you find that pricing is used for that. And there are companies who are only focused on pricing, others who are focused on products. I think for a lot of manufacturers, you need advanced pricing capability. You may not need the most sophisticated at this time. But again, that depends on each company. So then let's have a look at the next topic, because now we talked about subscriptions for an extended period of time. I mentioned AI. Now the visualization. What do I mean with visualization? That is something you see more and more of, right? So when you go to websites, you see that products are displayed in a 3D mode. You can zoom them in, zoom out. You can look at it from all sides. You can potentially download something, see it in your environment with the augmented reality. That's something that's becoming much more common for furniture, kitchen, stuff like that, where you would go there and configure a product and then place it in your environment. Typically very powerful for customers. You have something that's more rare as virtual reality. That is something where everything is virtual. That's typically used for something that you couldn't easily build or show to a customer, like you want to build in a hospital a new surgery room. You want to have a new dentist office is probably not the right name. Anyway, I guess you know what I mean. So a dentist place, and I put the chair in there and the machines that I need to buy, and that would all be virtual. So all of these are more popular. The most popular, I would say, is still 2D and 3D, and then augmented reality is catching up as well. Only used for physical products. So for every manufacturer, that should be interesting by default, right? So because it helps you with lots of in lots of areas. But before I mention the benefits, let's just mention over here, it's not just for manufacturing. That's also very popular for retail. You see that on Amazon all the time and other websites. You see medical devices, what I just mentioned, automotive. So for car manufacturers, everyone has multiple configurators that they use for multiple stages along the process. And there are many other industries who add to this. So this is also an area that will definitely get more. 3 key benefits that you can see here is, and that's across industries. You have higher customer satisfaction because I can see the products that I want to buy. Since I see them, I have the same understanding. It reduces misunderstandings and hence reduces returns. So, which may not be a big deal as long as you buy, I have an idea, $100 hard disk drive from Amazon. If it's not the right one, you send it back. If you buy a machine for $150,000 and it's the wrong one because you have some misunderstandings, that's a big problem, right? So in this case, it also reduces returns because you have this visual check that you do. And it also increases revenue in a lot of cases because as I visualize the product and I can see if some of my assumptions are correct, oh, I can add this, I didn't even know that, right? So, or as we go through it, I discover more things that I wasn't aware of before. So all this helps with visualization. You also see investments in these areas from private equity firms lately that have been done. I see that for lots of manufacturers who see increasing interest. In some cases, more than 50% of all customers ask for visualization capabilities, and that number is increasing for more companies. So even if you don't do that today, it is probably something you will have to deal with going forward, and that could be much more complex when you have CAD systems, so computer-aided design systems that you want to integrate with, and so on. But you can do a lot of things, and if you look for a new solution, from my point of view as a manufacturer, this is a must-check item at the beginning. If you really use it, it's a different question, but it's another one of the topics where I think you definitely should check it to make sure you're not regretting it in 2 years, or you have to integrate a new solution in 2 years and pay again for this implementation. The last part is how CPQ fits into this ecosystem. So now we talked about the 3 capabilities that closely go with CPQ. Now, your CPQ system is not a standalone system in most cases, right? So yes, some small, medium-sized manufacturers use it like that, and other industries as well, but that's not common. Common is that you have a whole number of systems. So you probably all have seen these architecture diagrams, which can get pretty busy if they even fit on one page. And at one point, you have on the front end side customer relationship management, where you handle your leads, your opportunities. And at the other end, you have an order management system or enterprise resource planning system, where you start entering your orders, and where you also have a finance system behind it that sends out invoices and so on. So now this all changes. Just think about what I mentioned with the subscriptions. Since you're going from one-time to repeated business, you still need to make sure that your CRM system works with these 2 systems. That has been always the case, that CPQ was right in the middle between CRM and ERP. But now you have even additional complexities through the subscriptions, because your contracts are no longer static. They change. You will have to add users. You will reduce users. You take one product out. You add another product. You want to align the runtime of certain products, right? So that they renew at the same time and so on. So this is another key integration over here that you have to keep in mind, and the changes, what that will mean for your current architecture, for your architecture going forward. And one thing I wanted to mention over here as well is there is more integrations that are coming. You probably all see that CPQ, the scope is getting bigger. More things are getting added to it at the periphery, but they all have to work together. So you have to know some basics around it. For example, e-commerce in the pandemic, lots of companies were using their CPQ solution. Now I want to use the same thing also on an e-commerce website. I want to potentially use it also for my channel partners. How do I do that? How much work is it? I have a CAD system and all my engineers work with, I have an idea, SolidWorks. and they do all the drawings in there. I don't want to reinvent this in CPQ. So how do I integrate this? And once I made changes on the CPQ side, how do I transfer this back to CAD systems, right? Another thing, data analytics. Everyone is gathering data, lots of data. How do you use this data? Are you showing it in the CPQ solution, or you have a data analytics tool that you want to export your CPQ data to? How does it integrate? Or you want to take payments on an online, on a web store, right? And are you going to build the payment gateway, or you integrate with payment solutions so that customers can do that, or you want to integrate with another solution? You have the Internet of Things, what we mentioned, and the billing already. Don't want to make it too complex. My main point here is, so all these systems could potentially be attached. Do you need to have an answer for all of this? No. But you already know where the focus is for your business. So think about that, where you could integrate, where it's really important for you. Don't try to do everything. That might be too much. But I would focus on some key areas, would consider that from the start, and make sure that you think about it, because CPQ implementations can become expensive if they are not done right. And if the offering is very complex, very wide for very big companies, they are quite considerable investments. So you want to make sure that you're not getting surprised by any integrations further down the road, and you realize this or that is not necessarily supported, if that is key for you. Anyway, so now I told you a whole bunch of things, so I wanted to summarize it, and I know I went a little over, so sorry about that, but I want to summarize it in 3 different sentences, right? So the first one to me is CPQ can help manufacturers in lots of ways. I'm 100% convinced about this. I've worked in this area for 25 years or 26 now, so, and I love the opportunities. I think it's great, but I also think you have to look what helps you to share the best practice and so on. So these are all the general CPQ benefits. I'm not reading through that. But my note of caution to everyone is focus on the core capabilities first. So product configuration, pricing, and quoting itself, including workflow. I would always look at this first. If you haven't done that before, if you're new to it, I would really focus on this first. Yes, all the other terms are really fancy, and you can talk a lot about it, as you could see with subscriptions. It may not really tackle your core points first. So look at the core capabilities first, and then grow from there. The other ones, I would say, especially in the selection phase, is more look if the capabilities are there, but do not plan to use them right away. And the last note may sound a little self-serving. I don't see it like that, but it may come across like that, as you should get help a little early. The reason for that, to me, is really, I've seen this many times where you have smaller teams gathering data like crazy on an Excel spreadsheet and trying to make sense out of all this, and you get data paralysis. There's too much data. You don't know what's really important. You have to learn it on the go, and you have very smart people who do that, but still there's a lot of learning. And instead of getting someone for 3 months active on that one, try to do it in 4 weeks, but get someone who can help you to prevent some pitfalls early on. Anyway, so I hope that was helpful, and I stop here, so because I think there were some Q&As, correct?
That's right, Frank. Thank you so much for going through all this. I appreciate all of the insight, and I think everyone on the call really benefits from your experience in talking to a variety of different companies at different stages in their CPQ journey. So this has been really helpful. And I'll leave Frank's contact information up for just a second, but then we are happy to share that with you after the call as well. But there are just a couple things I want to talk about before we get to the Q&A. So we talked a lot about the challenges and opportunities facing the industry, and it's important to quantify both the challenge and the solution. So there's 4 key figures on the screen that I want to draw your attention to in terms of the challenge that the industry is facing and the risk that the industry faces when they are using a more traditional approach instead of without having the right systems and processes in place. So 70% of quotes are not becoming orders. 30% of the orders that do come in have errors. 20% of margin is lost in order fulfillment, and 20% of revenue is lost in slow time to volume. So the bottom line here is a lot of rework, a loss of revenue, and a negative customer experience. But this is where the right CPQ built for configuring complex products comes into the conversation. And Tacton CPQ enables companies to enable their customers, enhance customer experience, remove friction between departments and systems, and integrate critical systems. So that's, I think, goes in line with exactly what Frank talked about with looking at CPQ as central to system architecture, visualization to enhance customer experience, and then looking at different models of service agreements and subscription agreements. So I think everyone is here today because you either know about or you're open to the possibilities that CPQ presents. And we can also quantify the impact that Tacton CPQ has had on our customers. So based on actual results from our customers, there are a couple of things that they've experienced that I want to call out. 34% increase in efficiency, a 30% increase in sales volume, and a 20% increase in profits. Ultimately, Tacton CPQ users are enabling their customers to buy custom, complex products and matching services faster than ever. And I'm so pleased that you guys all spent time with us today and that Frank was able to join to go through that excellent information. So now we'll move into the Q&A with Frank. Just as a reminder to everyone, use either the question or chat feature of GoToWebinar to send your questions through. And we will take just a few minutes to answer these now. And if you think of, we'll have members of the team follow up with you as well. So if anything comes to mind later, we will be more than happy to share those questions with Frank as well. So Frank, I'm seeing, I think, 2 questions right now in the queue. So we'll start there and let people give a chance to get their questions in as well. But the first question, I think you talked about this a little bit in terms of getting help and making sure you have a plan in place. But in terms of setting up CPQ, what do you think the most important step or the first step should be in setting up your configuration engine?
So from my experience, the best thing is to start with someone who is more neutral, right? So I always compare that with something like that. If you go to a BMW dealership, what kind of car do you think they will recommend to you? You will not get the recommendation for a Ford or for Mercedes or for any other car, right? So, and that may not necessarily be wrong. The question is just, I think also as a customer, you have to do quite some homework before you get started. And before you get too many people excited, but don't know yourself exactly what you want, what is most important, I think you have to take some time to find out what are your business requirements, what's really the focus. Yes, we talk about 10 topics, but they are not all equally important. So first, do your homework and find out what are the 2-3 topics that you really want to address. And once you're prepared and know what you want and know what you want to see or what you need to see, then I think it's important to bring the vendors in and like Tacton, right? So where they come in, show you the solutions, show how they deal with that. That helps a lot, but I see a lot of cases where customers jump onto this too early, where they just want to see a solution in action, and then you have a set expectation, and that's hard to overcome. So that's why I recommend to every customer, take a step back. It doesn't have to take very long. It doesn't have to be very expensive, but you do yourself a favor if you do your homework, because as long as you know what you want and what the vendor needs to show you to convince you that that's the right tool that can help you, you make life easier for everyone. But if you start prematurely and jump into it, you're probably also paying much more for this because you request people's time. And while you do that, you find out what you want. You could do that with a much smaller group, much earlier, and yeah, save some time and money and have a little bit more fun when you do the project. And I say that from experience, right? So I've done these projects for a long time myself. So, and they can be very painful if you start them incorrectly, which was actually one of the triggers why I started Novus in 2015.
Yeah, I think that's a really good insight. It's not trying to do too much all at one time and really understanding what your priorities are going into it. So I think that's really good advice. And then this question actually follows kind of nicely with that, with the former conversation. So what do you think is most important to measure in whether or not a CPQ implementation is successful?
Well, that's that's a fuzzy question. It's like,
It's a loaded question, Frank.
I give you the best answer I can come up with, right? So to me, what's the most important thing generally, and that could be different in a unique case, is how many people actually use the tool afterwards. I assume it's an average implementation. It probably has some faults, and in some areas it's pretty good. But even if you would have the best implementation, if nobody uses it, it's kind of pointless, and people get less patient to learn these things. So it will be much harder to send anyone to a training class for 2 days to learn how to use the tools. So the tools do more things, have more capability, and you have to explain it much faster to people who get more impatient and hence have a tendency to use. So you have a shorter amount of time to make an impression, and people will decide quickly if they use it or not. So to get people to use the tools, that to me is the biggest challenge. As I mentioned before, I think you have great tools in the CPQ area. I'm 100% convinced about that. And they can help a lot. But anyway, it doesn't help to have a good tool. If you're very proud of engineering stuff, that's great. If nobody's using it, it's pointless to me as a customer, right? As a customer, I need people who use the tools. I need to see the benefit. If that's, then I have a good tool, even if it doesn't use all the capabilities. But I see more benefits probably on my side, and you could make up 100 different KPIs around that, right? So, but that's the key thing.
Great, thank you. We have another question about using AI. So what about, or do you have experience with using AI for comparing calculated prices, so cost and margin, and negotiated prices of products sold, so market price? Does that make sense? Or
so there are industries, there are situations where you need to have very sophisticated pricing. Now, to me, if you have these super, and when I say super complex, that's not true. So let's put it like this: if I'm a customer, I have a pricing team. So pricing is important for me, important enough that I have a dedicated team. So I have pricing experts. I potentially even give them some executive roles and stuff like that. They can make decisions on the C level, right? So that's great. So in this case, I know there are lots of people who think a lot about pricing. They come back with all kinds of suggestions. They need to have certain algorithms represented in this. They want to have specific scenarios. They want to calculate prices dynamically as needed. They also want to go back and do the rebate management and commission management and all other kinds of things. Then I would say, if you're really going that far, when I look at the market right now, I would almost say, and I see that with large companies, they have dedicated solutions then for pricing. Then they approach it more from a pricing perspective than from a CPQ perspective. If you have normal, what I see with most manufacturers is, I would think you have pricing requirements, yes, but they would not necessarily always require that you have solutions which support, for example, price optimization. Could be for large manufacturers, right? So large global manufacturers may have that need, but you could integrate that with the CPQ solution. But to me, this is something you would have to really look in detail to see what makes the most sense, right? I see that a lot of the pricing requirements that most of the manufacturers use most of the time do not fall into this area, what I would call advanced pricing, right? So I don't see that they would necessarily need price optimization. They have lots of options to improve their pricing, to go to a more value pricing based approach and stuff like that. But not everyone is there. When you look at this, I think only 5 to 10% of the global big companies are really deep into this advanced pricing, including price optimizations. Others probably get along with simpler stuff. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't get more in the future, right? But when you look at all the topics we discussed so far, that's already quite a bit. And if pricing is not really the main issue, I would challenge everyone to say, what pricing capabilities do you need that a lot of the vendors that are typically used in the manufacturing space, like Tacton, cannot satisfy, right? So then we would have to really go and dig a little bit deeper. But normally I would say an average complex solution can use a standard CPQ solutions for manufacturing business. Some cases, more the exceptions, require a different tool because you're really looking for a pricing tool and not for a configurator.
Yep, that makes sense. Thanks, Frank. And it looks like I think we've got most of the questions answered, and I think we are just at time. So I want to thank everyone again for joining us today. And like I said earlier, members of the Tacton team will follow up to see if there are any further questions, if you have any thoughts, or if there's anything we can do to help you out. And also more than happy to share Frank's information with you as well. So again, thank you for joining, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.